Premier League is back this weekend, and I have my predictions ready to go. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And let's get straight into it because my first prediction is probably the easiest one I could have chosen. Premier League champions. Who do I think is going to win the Premier League this season? Arsenal. I think Arsenal are the easiest choice. They are the top dogs right now. Even the summer, they're having a very good summer. They've signed Bruno Guimaraes, Solis, and now they just announced Ezri Konsa. And that just builds on the champions. There's been a lot of times where teams win the Premier League, but they don't really get the players to go for it again, right? And I think Arsenal did that just fine with Bruno Guimaraes, Ezri Konsa, and Solis looks to be a very good, solid player. And the thing is, the transfer window ends September 1st. I genuinely believe they will sign a very good attacker before the transfer window ends. Whether it's a winger or whether it's a striker, I'm pretty confident that Arsenal will sign another very, very good attacker. So you look at the window, you look at the managers in the other Premier League, in the rest of the Premier League, right? All the other managers are very inexperienced. They don't have the time that Arteta has had. Arteta's been there for years. I'm pretty sure he's probably the person that's been there the most, right? And out of all the Premier League managers right now, and there's a lot of young teams, there's a lot of young managers, a lot of inexperienced managers, a lot of managers who are this is their first time in the Prem. So I think all of that being said, alongside with how solid they are defensively, alongside how their new signings, and alongside Arteta and the type of players they have, and the very good talent that they have, I think Arsenal will retain it. There would have to be something catastrophic for Arsenal to not retain it, or it would have to be someone like a Leicester season, right, where a Chelsea or a Liverpool or something out of nowhere, or just a team out of nowhere comes out a very good time, and Arsenal just it would have to be very catastrophic for Arsenal to not win the league this season. There's a lot of reasons, very good players, and then even if they sign another attacker, it's just gonna. I feel like they're too unstoppable when it comes to the Premier League, right? And I think they're going for the Champions League. With signings like Konsa, signings like Zolis, signings like Bruno Guimaraes, the depth they have. They usually this past season they would play Wolves, right, or they would play Burnley, or they would play these time with lower class teams. And they would have to play Saliba Gabriel. They would have to play Saliba Gabriel, Declan Rice. Now they can rest those players. If it's a Champions League week and you're playing at home against Ipswich, you could play Konsa and Mosquera, or Konsa and Hincapié, and rest Gabriel and Saliba, and then rest Declan Rice and play Miles Lewis Kelly and Zubimendi. Like, the depth they have and the quality of depth they have is very good, and I genuinely believe they will retain it. Something terrible would have to happen for them to not retain it. Second place, a lot of people might disagree. A lot of people might agree. I think this team is very 50 right now, 50-50 right now. Chelsea Football Club. I think Chelsea Football Club are going to do very well. Yes, second for the type of the title winning team Chelsea wants to be isn't probably good enough, but I think they could get second and then challenge for an FA Cup, challenge for a Carabao. I feel like that would be a very successful season for them compared to finishing ninth last season. Signings like Rogers, signings like Palestra, even signings like Quenda. Well, they signed Quenda, but it's new addition to their squad. And then signings like Lacroix, I think they just make some very solid. Yes, they signed Welbeck. Yes, they signed I forgot his name, but they made a lot of signings, and I just think they're signings that fit what Xabi Alonso wants. They signed the left wing back from Rayo Vallecano, and I just think Jordan Henderson. How can I forget Jordan Henderson? He's gonna be a very important leader. They got a realm of like 8 or 9 red cards last season. So people like Danny Welbeck, like Lacroix, like Jordan Henderson are gonna be able to help with that. Help the young players build have a winning mentality, have a very disciplined mentality. Jordan Henderson, he's pretty old now compared to other players, and he's still peak fitness because of how disciplined he is, how much of a leader Jordan Henderson is. Danny Welbeck is as well, and they have so much young talent that I didn't think that going into the transfer window that they needed some crazy more young talent. They needed experience. Lacroix is experienced. Morgan Rogers, he's been in the Prem for probably 2 years now. Very good. He's an England international. That's some sort of experience. Lacroix experience. If you don't want to count Morgan Rogers, don't count him. But then you go to Danny Welbeck. Jordan Henderson. These are three very experienced guys already, and at this point, Levi Colwell is pretty very experienced. Cole Palmer, players like Joao Pedro, who's been in the Prem for a good amount of time. Joao Pedro has been in the Prem for a good amount of time now as well, so he's pretty experienced. But players like Jordan Henderson, Danny Welbeck, and then the man himself, Xabi Alonso. I think he's the most important part of this Chelsea. If they had any other manager that wasn't named Xabi Alonso or didn't have the experience of Xabi Alonso or hadn't won what Xabi Alonso won, I think it would be very different. But with Xabi Alonso and just the change of the atmosphere around Chelsea, I think they will finish second. I think Xabi Alonso and all the thing as well, like the rest of the Premier League, there's a lot of new young managers moving up the rankings, and I think Xabi Alonso himself is an established manager, So I think his time at Real Madrid was gonna help him. He learned how to manage with ego. So no one in this Chelsea team could ego Xabi Alonso. No one in this Chelsea team is nowhere near compared to the Real Madrid players. None of these players have the ego or the ability of Mbappe. None of these players have the ego or ability of Vinicius Junior, of Jude Bellingham, of Rudiger, of Alaba, of Valverde, of Chouameni. None of these Chelsea players have the quality, the ego, the resume of those Real Madrid players. So no one in this Chelsea team can out ego or just be above Xabi Alonso, So Real Madrid, he learned from that. Xabi Alonso, very tactical manager, very good manager, speaks very well. I think he's going to be very much loved by Chelsea, and I think they'll finish second. Third place. Now, this is the thing, right? From second to sixth. I think teams could just finish anywhere around there. You'll see my top six teams, right? The second is to even seventh, right? My second to seventh, these are teams that could just move around. Like they could either finish sixth or they could finish second. It's such a tight Premier League. It's such an open Premier League. There's nothing is said, nothing is settled. I genuinely believe it's gonna be very, very a lot of movement throughout the season. So take this with a pinch of salt, right? Because I'm gonna say third place, I'm gonna say second place, I'm gonna say seventh place. These teams could very well just rotate or alternate throughout the season, and someone like Chelsea could end up finishing fourth or fifth. So and the teams I have sixth and seventh could probably finish third or fourth, So take this with a pinch of salt. But I just think these teams in this order, from what I've seen, but these teams very well could be moving around the second and seventh positions, So third place I have Liverpool Football Club, and that they are a club that I've been very critical about. I made a video on them. I said that they need more, and look, if they sign Barcola, if they have a front four of Isak, Barcola, Rio and Gamoa, or Gakpo, and Florian Wirtz behind, under Iraola, I think they'll do just fine. I think they'll be perfectly fine. Isak seems to be finding his feet a little bit in preseason. I've watched a couple of clips, a couple of games, and he looks to be finding his feet. He's scoring goals. He's looking confident. He played in the World Cup, so he's fit. I feel like his legs are getting back to it. And then if they sign Barcola, I rate Barcola very highly, and I just think he fits Iraola perfectly, right? Fast, attacking, winger. And then you have Isak in the middle. You have Florian Wirtz, who under Iraola could find his feet. He could find the assists. He could find the goals. He could find the spaces. And then Rio and Gamo, I think this is going to be a very, very good, big season for Rio and Gamo. He's not my young player of the year, right? He could be my young player of the year for finishing third and being an important part of Liverpool, but I have someone else. But he could have a very good year. If Gakpo ends up leaving, which I don't think Gakpo's gonna leave, he could have a very good year. He could have a couple of goals here and there. And people are talking about the death, and I understand. But by the time they need the death, by the time that the death is needed, Ekitike might be back. They might do some January signings. Harvey Elliott is still there. I think he can play a right wing like role if they really needed to. They're talking about Liverpool need a six. They need someone to sit back, someone to clean up. But Iraola doesn't really need that type of player. He doesn't need a natural six. He's a very forward, attacking, pressing, all out attack type of manager. And players like a double pivot of Soboslai and Gravenberch is perfectly fine with Alexis McAllister on the bench. I think Bajatic is a player that I highly rate. Spanish player Bajatic, young player, hasn't gotten enough minutes. If he's back in the Liverpool squad, he'll get some minutes. Put some youngsters in. And then in defense, yes, Kirk. They talked about people like to hate on Kirkes, but Kirkes himself did very well under Donny Iraola. And they still have Van Dijk. Jacquet has been looking very good in preseason. Ronald Araujo is solid enough alongside Van Dijk. If it was Ronald Araujo and Jacquet, then that would be a huge problem. But it's Ronald Araujo alongside Virgil van Dijk, who I think will do perfectly well. Right back, yes, it's a problem, but I feel like Connor Bradley, Frank Pone has been like Frank Pone to me looks like an Iraola right back. Full force attacking, pressing, moving forward, pressing the attacker, pressing the opposition. I think that they'll do fine, and genuinely, it's because I trust Iraola. I rate Iraola so highly. I've talked about Iraola so much throughout my channel, throughout the entire last season. I rate Iraola very, very highly, and I think a lot of these players fit Iraola. When Xavi Alonso joined Chelsea, I talked about him. Xavi Alonso should have joined Liverpool because of the history and what it means for him to be at Liverpool. But Iraola fits the Liverpool club type of style. What Liverpool fans want is a club like style of play, and I think Iraola does that. And if Anfield is happy and Anfield is nice and loud and bright and just heavy for the opposition, and with the players they have, because people have been talking, oh, they lost Salah, they lost Robertson, they lost now Curtis Jones going to Inter Milan, but that's a lot of bad ifs. But what if Isak starts scoring like he did 2 seasons ago? What if Florian Wirtz start controlling games like he did 2 seasons ago? What if Barcola starts scoring goals because now he gets more minutes, unlike he did at PSG? What if Gakpo starts scoring? What if Soboslai has another amazing season? What if Garibridge finds his feet again? What if Virgil van Dijk finds just his presence again? And then what if their goalkeeper Allison is now back at it? There's a lot of people are talking about the bad ifs. What ifs? What if they don't replace Salah? What if they don't replace Robertson? What if Kirkes starts off bad again? But what if the good is? And I think there's more good ifs. Isak is finding his feet, and what if he starts banging in goals like he used to? Florian Wirtz, he could be a world class player. You look at Barcola, he could be a world class player. He hasn't gotten enough minutes at PSG. Sobos, like I think he's one of the top five best midfielders in the league. Gravenberch, he's so solid. He's very good on the ball. So I think Liverpool will finish third. Fourth, I have City. Now, between fourth and fifth, I was really changing. Well, between third, fourth, and fifth, I was really changing them. Between second and seventh, it was really hard to choose. Fourth, I have Manchester City because I don't really. I'm not liking Enzo Maresca there. I'm not liking the way they've been playing in preseason and even in the Community Shield. The way they have Ellie Anderson right next to the right wing. That doesn't make sense to me. You have Kovacic as the lone six between in front of the center backs. It doesn't really. I don't really get it. I don't understand what he's trying to do. He's not using the best capabilities of his players. You have Foden. Yes, you have Foden in a position where he likes to be, but you have Elliot Anderson, who you paid 120 million for, right next to the right wing, where his best position is pretty much what Kovacic was doing. What he did at England, right? I think he did very well in England, being that six, being that player that cleans up, moves the ball forward, dictates what he can, dictates play when he can. I think that's what he did, but he has Elliot Anderson out right next to, I think it was Semenyo or Doku, or right next to the right sided player. Then you have Foden up there, and then you have Jeremy Doku and Semenyo. Yeah, just the way the style he has doesn't really make sense to me. He leaves a lot of space for teams to counterattack. And they struggled in defense under Pep Guardiola. So under Enzo Maresca, I just feel like they're gonna struggle even more. They lost John Stones. They lost, someone that people haven't talked about. They lost Ake. Was so solid for City. They lost John Stones. They lost Ake. Josko Guardiola hasn't played a full season in a while. Ruben Diaz hasn't been at his best feet. Kusanov is someone I rate very highly. Gehi might get used to it, right? But I just think they lost Ake, they lost John Stones, they lost Bernardo Silva, they lost Pep Guardiola, and he's probably the most important. But for me, before this player left, I had him second. Rodri. Rodri has joined Barcelona. He even got presented today. And I just think this is a huge loss. Yes. And I think this is the big difference between finishing second. I had them solidify second. I had City to solidify themselves second. But when they lost Rodri, I think it's gonna be long days for them. They're about to sign Buadi, but Buadi is a young player. He hasn't really played at the Premier League level. He doesn't know the physical aspects. He still hasn't played with. You have a new midfield. You have a completely new midfield. The midfield for the last 6 years has been Bernardo Silva, Rodri, Gundogan, De Bruyne. Bernardo Silva, Rodri, the last 2 years, right? But now you have Ellie Anderson and Buadi, right? And then you have either Turkey or Foden in front of them. The only reason I have them to stay top four is because of Erling Haaland. Genuinely, like if you saw my Community Shield prediction, I thought City were gonna win because of Haaland, and then I think Haaland will find his feet. Haaland will win you at least 10 to 15 games himself. Haaland will win you even more probably. Alone will win you a lot of points. Enough points, enough goals scored that he will win you a lot of games for them to finish fourth. And yeah, I'm not convinced yet by this City team. Like I said, struggled defensively under Pep Guardiola, and now that they've lost Rodri, John Stones, Ake, and now they have Endo Maresca, I think they'll struggle even more in defense. I think they'll concede a lot of goals, and I think they'll finish fourth. Fifth, I have Man United. Right, this is the thing. Man United are about to announce Baleba from Brighton, and I think that's the last piece they've been missing in midfield. And I really like how Man United is looking right now. I genuinely like how Man United is looking. I made a video about them criticizing them how much that they need to spend more. They need more players. They need an attacker, a midfielder, a fullback. And now they're about to announce Baleba. And now you look at their midfield. Kobe Mainu, Tillemans, Andre Santos, Bruno Fernandes, Mason Mount, and now Baleba. That's six midfielders. Six midfielders. And I just think that those six midfielders have very, very high quality. They're so good, and they're all very different type of players. Yuri Tillemans and Kobe Mainu are very similar in my opinion. I think they're very similar players, like to be on the ball, very good going forward, on the ball. Most of their success is on the ball, right? You look at Andre Santos, he's a different type of midfielder. I think he's more of a box to box. He wins his tackles. He's very good tackler, very good at winning the ball. That's something that TP teams people don't really talk about. Players that tackle and win the ball. Bruno Guimaraes for Arsenal. Bruno Guimaraes himself is very good at that, and I think Andre Santos is very good at that as well. Winning your tackles, moving the ball forward. At Strasbourg, he was even scoring a lot of goals, so he's more of a box to box Andre Santos. Baleba, he's I think he's a six. I think he's genuinely a six. From the times I've seen him play, he likes to play deep. He likes to play the ball around, but he's very good at winning balls back. He's very good in his defensive duels, and he could cover a lot of ground. That's something that I think Mainu and Tillemans can't really do too much. They're not that athletic, but players like Baleba, players like Andre Santos, they're very athletic, cover a lot of ground, win their tackles, very good players. And then you have Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes and the 10, right? I think that's very, very good midfield. I think that's a very positive way to go. And then you look at their attack; they have arguably one of the best attacks in the Premier League. And Mbumo Amad Diallo at right wing, Sesko Joshua Zirkzee, who I'm not convinced by Joshua Zirkzee, but Sesko, who I rate very highly, and Joshua Zirkzee at the striker, left wing Cunha and Rashford. That is a very solid squad. You have a rotation in there. But for me, the defense is not good enough. I don't rate the defense very highly, and the way Michael Carrick wants to play, and the way that Man United are gonna have the ball a lot this season. They're gonna have the ball a lot. Teams are gonna respect them because of the amount of attack and midfield and quality they have. But I just don't think they have enough right now. If Matthias de Ligt was a player that played 30, 40 games a season, fine. But no, I feel like they're starting center backs for some time. It's gonna be Maguire and Licha if they're fit. And if it's not Maguire and Licha, I have a very good feeling that it's gonna be Maguire in heaven. And I just think that if you have a lot of space in behind, you need faster center backs. I think you need faster center backs than that. So I think I'm gonna go with Man United fifth, and then sixth and seventh I have Villa and Spurs. And yeah, Spurs. I think Spurs can make a run for top four. I genuinely do. If they buy, and I think they're missing attack. They're missing goals. They're missing attack. I think they're missing that. And Villa, yes, they lost Every Konsa. They might lose Ollie Watkins. They lost Tillemans. They lost Rogers. But I still think Unai Emery will get the better hand of them. I think he'll get the best out of Garnacho. I think he'll get the best out of their midfield of Camaro and Joao Gomez. I think they'll get the best out of their players, and I just think that Unai Emery will ultimately finish in the top seven. I'd be surprised if they get Champions League this season unless they sign some crazy players. But I think Spurs are the team that can make a run for top four, top five, Champions League in general. I genuinely think that they have the midfield, Mateus Fernandes, Tonali, and then you look at Bregva on the bench. You look at so many players. You look at their defense of Senesi, Van de Ven could play either left back, he could play center back. You have the Spurs have so many players. Roberto De Zerbi, someone I've talked about a lot, and I think Spurs can make a run for that top four. And like I said, from second to seventh, they could all rotate, they could all chop and change. I think it's going to be a very fun Premier League. That is my table for the Premier League predictions. If you ask me about relegation, I think the same teams that came up are going to go back down. I think those teams still need a lot. The teams that came back up are going to go back down. And I just think Arsenal are going to win it again. And I think if you were to ask me which teams I think are solidified in the positions I said, Arsenal, and I think Chelsea. I think Chelsea are very good contention to be second place. And I just think Arsenal are gonna go back to back for the first time in their history, in the Premier League history. For their first time in Arsenal's Premier League history, I think Arsenal are gonna be back to back Premier League champions. And just a quick recap: Arsenal won, Chelsea second, Liverpool third, City four, United fifth. Villa sixth. No, Spurs sixth. Villa seventh. That is my Premier League predictions. Make sure to like and subscribe. Comment who you think who's gonna be your Premier League winner. Who's your top five? Who's your sixth and seventh? Comment down below if you agree or disagree. And I'll see you guys when the Premier League starts. Peace.